Hello everyone and welcome to Deckbuilding Derezzed. I'm your host Code Marvelous, and today I'm joined by Spags of the ANRPC.
Hey Dan, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks very much for coming on the show.
Of course, anytime.
So we're talking today about a very interesting build that Spags put up recently that only I think basically based on the date it was published missed deck list of the week. Just a really neat HB deck, which you don't see a ton of, really. There's not a lot of chatter on HB right now.
No, I think people have gone to sleep on it because Rumor Mill came out and kind of dashed a lot of people's food coats hopes. So
Yeah.
people were trying Jeeves and Hasty CI, but I mean ETF kind of, you're right, has gone to sleep for a bit.
Yeah, because and also there's a myriad of reason why Big Ice is not as strong as it had been in the past, which is usually what people go to when they think of ETF, which is not exactly what you're doing here, but we'll get into all that. So why don't we talk a little bit about, also, what is this, just out of curiosity, what is this image? It doesn't show up for me.
Oh, it doesn't. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know what the deal is. It shows up for some browsers and some people it doesn't. I don't know. It's strange. It's a Team Fortress 2 reference, which of course
Is
what
is
the
it
deck's
the
named
is
after.
it the you're a loose cannon but you're a good cop, the sandwich cop thing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Do you remember that line from the Heavy?
Yeah.
So for people at home who don't know, there's an old classic shooter called Team Fortress 2, and it was very hilarious. And one of my favorite characters was the Heavy, was this big Russian guy, and one of his items was the Sandvich, right? It was a piece of food he could eat or throw out, and every time he used it and ate it, he had some funny line. There were like 30 different lines, and one of them was, "Yeah, you're a
Yeah.
loose cannon, Sandvich, but you're a damn good cop."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the
And
picture
it's
is.
just it's just complete madness.
So,
Yeah. I played a lot out of that game.
yes.
Like,
Oh, it's
but I was
fantastic.
mostly beating people to death with bats. Less the
Uh,
Heavy, more running around and beating down snipers.
yeah.
But yeah, so it's HB. HB's really good. I hear HB's ability is probably the best out of the core set.
I would say so. It just, I mean, so useful, right? Econ every turn, and as we've gone forward, sometimes on both players' turns.
Yeah. And I think also one of the most interesting things about ETF is it's one of the few identities that doesn't predispose a deck type. Right?
Right.
Most of the other IDs, especially corp IDs, kind of push you in a direction of a specific archetype. This is like, really do what you want, because you're probably going to install cards at some point. Like,
I would
yeah.
agree, Dan. Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's so ubiquitous. You don't know what's coming out of it. My friend Aaron Andrews won a store championship with one thing he always loves, traps out of HB, using things like snares,
Oh, it's so bad.
edge of world, and then just using preemptive actions to recur them. I mean, he's going to just continually pound you with snares. Good luck with your medium digs.
Yeah. So where do you want to start if we're going to talk about this build?
Well, you can see it in the write-up here. Basically, I got bored, as we all do, so we wanted to try something else. Well, not all of us. Some of us just play Wizard and CTM constantly, but
But we don't talk about those people.
we don't invite them on. So I was trying Architects of Tomorrow, and I was really checking some of the builds out there, and I was playing around them. I'm like, what if we try like an asset-heavy build to fund the economy, to help assist it, kind of rush with the bioroids, but then use friends in high places to either bring back ice we've lost to cutlery or parasites or money, right?
Right.
Also thinking defensive upgrades, and it worked. It was fine, but after a while, the ID ability just wasn't triggering, mid to late game for me. And I'm like, you know what? I'm installing stuff. Of course, there should just be an ETF. Then I got serious and started just polishing rough edges. And I mean, I've seriously played at least 60 games of this deck, and it's gone through a lot of iterations.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really polished build, and it's definitely very strong. And I definitely agree with the summation. Like, I tried so hard to make Architects of Tomorrow work, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. The mid-game is just not as strong. The early game, again, especially against run-based runners like Andy, can be pretty good. And then a lot of times you're starving in the middle of the game.
Right. Whereas, we know ETF, I mean, it's always firing, especially with friends now. You're firing it every turn pretty much. And, talk about polishing. This could even be polished further. Like I know it has Sandberg, and that's fun. Like I saw Ben Nee streaming this today, second place at Worlds. And he's like, oh, that Sandvich is, that's a funny card, but, or Sandberg. So he got rid of it and, of course, put more quote, useful tools in. But I still like the Sandberg. I think it's fun.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about some of the, I guess we'll start with friends in high places, because that's kind of one of the linchpins here. So for those of you who don't know or have friends that actually like you, this card is a 2-cost terminal operation, so it ends your turn when you play it, and you install 2 cards from your archives, paying all install costs. But yeah, a lot of times if I'm not losing ice, I basically read this as get 2 sex bots back.
Or the combo, the grid, the breaker bay, and the thing, which is just really disheartening after they spend a ton of money getting rid of it. And the terminal is nice because they want to get away. They don't want it to be part of some combo shenanigans. But I looked at this card and I saw the 1 influence, but then I said I can probably use this in HB with our old favorite sex bots, as you noted. But the 1 influence scares me for the future because I feel like this is going to be seen everywhere, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think this is definitely going to be a really strong NEH card, especially since it'll be a net of 2 clicks of value because it'll be 2 installs and a draw. So you'll have a net positive of 2 clicks of value in Near Earth Hub because you'll get 2 installs and 1 draw. Potentially.
Right. Even more than if you're bringing back things like advanced assembly lines and that, it can really get ridiculous. And let's not even bring up like the real evil you could use this in, like IG or Gagarin, where you just keep bringing back museums.
No, that's so bad. Yeah,
you'll get cancer if we talk about that, so let's not.
Yeah, no, that's so bad. I mean, I'm sure I have a friend of mine in my meta who likes Prison Gagarin, so I'm sure that card's in my future. That combo's in my future. But yeah, it's just a really solid card, and one of the things that you and I were discussing before we started recording was just that it's a card we think that's kind of been designed for a meta we're going into, not the meta that we're in now. So it's enhancing the power level of assets right now in preparation for Jackson being gone.
Right. I would agree with that. I think this, don't you think, starting with maybe a little of last cycle, definitely with Flashpoint, and you're going to see it in the red sand, is you're going to have this kind of weird cross meta where they're prepping for rotation, the first part of it, but you're going to have every card available, so you can have a weird thing like, everyone's talking about the last pack of red sand where we're going to have 6 shocks, right? You're going to have 3 breach domes and 3 shocks, and that's going to be awful. Hell.
Yeah, it's going to be
1
awful.
Month of hell.
Yeah, why don't we just go ahead and play some Potential Unleashed with 6 shocks? That seems okay.
Oh, nasty. So, yeah, you're going to have some weird stuff with this card and this cycle for sure, but I thought it was a card to build around. I started with 2. It seemed foolish. Let's go to 3, so I immediately jammed it up to 3.
Yeah, I mean, and it's good. Like, it's also like it's also a neat theme. Like, I like the theme of all of this, where it's basically like, oh, like you have friends in the government that's intervening right now, so you're able to get your stuff that's been destroyed by all the protests and the cyber terrorists back.
Right, they're giving you a nice little boost here and some nice help, and it's just really strong. And people at first didn't really think about the ice too, because there's still a lot of ice destruction. En passant is out there, and you still have cutlery and parasites. And one nice thing against those decks, keep bringing that back, or bring back your Cyberdex virus suite. I feel like most decks are winning with medium. Just keep slapping that on R&D and just every turn slow them down.
Yeah, 100%. So if we're going to stick with operations, we've only got 1 biotic labor, but it's a nice closer.
Yep, I think Ben Nee went to 2. You definitely could do that. I thought 1 was fine. It could even be cut, to be honest. You could just rely more on the sands and playing a never advanced game.
Yeah. And then we've got hedge funds, ubiquitous, money's really good.
Yep.
Where do you want to go next?
We can talk about the assets, I suppose.
Yeah. So we got some Adonis. We got some Eve. When you want to talk about ETF and then installing some cards, it's pretty good.
Yep, they're strong when if you're going to use Breaker Bay Grid, those are the two you want to use. And I even played around a little bit with Launch Campaign. One nice thing about Launch Campaign, it's never trash. Like once you fire it, like they always leave it, which is cool. But hard to beat these two. They're just powerhouses.
Right. And it's worth noting for anybody who's maybe newer to the game and isn't used to a lot of maybe the HB kind of like mindset that a lot of people have developed over time is like basically in ETF, all of these money assets get better because of your install credit basically being a 1 credit discount effectively on their res cost. And then even if they get trashed before you resed, you still got the credit for putting them down.
For sure. And hopefully in this deck, you're not paying the resin at all most of the time.
That's also true. I'm actually going to jump on that case before we go on to the other assets to Breaker Bay Grid. The best HB card ever printed that's not an HB card.
Yes, for sure. I mean, it also gets some use with hostile infrastructure. Basically, whenever you have an asset that's going to cost 4 or 5, I think you're going to see a possibility for this card to be used. And yeah, the funny thing is, since we're using this in Sand, you're going to need multiple remotes, which I thought was fun to play around with because most decks don't do that, like Glacier or Fast Advance style decks.
Right. Yeah.
So usually you're protecting multiple remotes with this card.
Yeah, and it's just really solid. And it's worth noting that basically to clear a server, an extra 2 credits is not insignificant if there's an even there that they need to get rid of.
Right. I think especially in that Wizard matchup where if you're trying to fight and overwhelm him, they use that 3 credits for the Adonis. Now they have to dip into the real money. You know, Wizards got to go into the pocketbook for this one.
Right, absolutely. And then as far as assets, we've got Jackson Howard, pretty ubiquitous, pretty solid. And then we've got one of my favorite cards, and that's Sandberg. I love this card so much. Because it's so corporate themed. Oh, we're really overly rich? Well, we're going to just turn that money into power, literally. Like,
without a doubt, right? Because it reaches a point in this deck where it can reach it, where if they let your stuff roll, you're going to hit turn 5 or 6. You may have 30 credits, and what are you going to do with all that money? And I played around with a few things, Dan, with the Next Ice, and I had the old Next Gold corporate troubleshooter trick in here, and to be a little more useful and powerful across the board, I decided to go back to Sandberg. Rumor mill be damned.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of rumor mill floating around right now. And a lot of times, if you're not playing defensive upgrades in the server, right, because we're doing more of a sand play here, they're not necessarily going to preemptively install it. So if you just have it face down in a random server, I've hit a couple people with it who think it's an Eve that I haven't resed yet.
Exactly, right. You save it for that power punch when they're coming in, and it can really slam them.
It can ruin some lives.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a fantastic card. I love the theme of it. I also love this idea. This is one of the first cards, the Flashpoint cycle, where it's basically like, nope, we're pulling into ourselves, and all of the corps are hoarding their assets and just using it to shore up their defenses. No research, no neat trick, just money into ice strength.
For sure.
And it's also got a great ratio. 0 to 4 is incredible.
The 4 trash cost it reaches that point where it's painful.
Yeah. All right. So we've got upgrades. We've got Breaker Bay, like we discussed before. Very solid. As you mentioned, we do have another grid, Sand City grid, which can't commingle with Breaker Bay. If it could, that would be pretty incredible.
For sure. But
go ahead and speak a little bit about
this is the meat of the deck.
This.
Yeah, I decided, and I kind of did it in my soul. I've been trying to play more Glacier and Never Advancey type styles and Fast Advance while getting around Rumor Mill. The classic food coats was with Ash and Caprice, which a timely Rumor Mill slams them. Whereas this card, even at 4 influence, it has to be dealt with, right? As Zach Cavis noted to me, it's probably the best defensive upgrade in the game because
they have to deal with it.
They got to deal with it, and that 5 cost is rough. And if they don't deal with it, you might get multiple turns of just accelerating out. Like in this game, in this deck, I've had plenty of games won in 9 or 10 turns because if they don't get to this, they're done.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting, this deck really creates an asset spam. So if they're trashing everything, they might not trash Jackson Howard right away if they can't. if they have to like break ice to get to him. So then you're gonna just be like, I guess I'll fire this ABT. Oh, you still didn't trash Sand? I guess I'll fire this one too and see what happens.
Right, exactly. I think because they realize there are so many targets to trash, and with friends in high places, normally getting rid of a Howard in most decks is like, oh, they're either they have to waste the future Howards permanently, whereas in this deck, you're like, whatever, I'll get it at some point. And preemptive is kind of the same tool, but friends is even better because you get two things. So usually you can leave a Howard live and just draw 2 cards whenever you want, which is a great feeling.
Yeah, it's a really good feeling. Then we got a single Cyberdex Virus Suite. I imagine for a lot of the reasons you talked about, medium's everywhere right now.
Yep. I'd love to go to 2. I guess you could find a slot maybe somewhere, but you can throw it on a Breaker Bay grid for free. It's another never advanced tool. It's great against viruses. It's great against Claw. Yeah, it's just one of the best cards out there.
Yeah. And then going on to let's do the Ice Suite.
Sure.
So we've got the next Silver, which is not that great on its own, but it's worth noting that more people are hard breaking barriers rather than destroying them, though there is still a lot of ice destruction. So if this stays on the board, it can become incredibly taxing for any stealth build or any of the non-parasite Anarch builds that are running around right now.
Right, exactly. Part of the, when I first built this deck, it was in Architects, so it was obviously Bioroids. When I moved it out of there, I was looking for a different ice suite, and I wanted some more hard ETR to protect those assets early. And I wanted to try the next suite. It seemed good, especially whether due to boredom or whatever. Personally, more people going on the smoke, more people playing Andy, these power tap decks. And I kind of built this as a counter to it where I'm going to put out ice where it's going to be painful to go through if you can't get rid of it. And if those decks can't kill it, this next ice gets pretty ugly pretty fast.
Next Silver is terrible for Andy, too, because Andy and Smoke both largely hard pay for barriers, right? Like, especially in my Smoke deck, like, when I'm playing against a deck like this, your Code Gates and your Sentries are largely irrelevant. That's what I'm breaking efficiently. But every barrier is costing me hard-earned real money. So, like, when this gets up to, like, 5 subroutines, and there's, like, 2 of them on the board, that's not great for anybody. Well, it's great for somebody, but it's certainly not me.
No, it feels good to make a paperclip pay, like, 3 or 4 credits to break a 1-strength ice, for sure.
Yeah, that's also pretty funny, too. Yeah. We've got Wall of Static. Any reason Wall of Static over something like Vanilla?
Just something with a little more meat. I feel like the deck doesn't have an issue with money. This could even be a Bastion. Vanilla, to me, is a card usually saved for decks that want to go faster and want to save money. I feel like this deck doesn't have money issues, so I want something that could survive a Parasite a little easier.
That's fair. Yeah, that makes sense. So we got Fairchild 3.0. This is a pretty good ice. I think it's definitely one of the big winners that HB got this cycle.
Yeah, it definitely has become a staple just because you have to deal with it either on the first click. You have to run first click, or you're going to pay dearly to get through it.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a really good piece of ice. Yeah.
It really is. I'm at 2 in this list, I believe. I mean, I think I've gone up to 3 since. I've wavered back and forth. It's just so good.
Yeah, it's really good.
I threw a Touring in just for maybe the rise of Faust again, and just for something different.
I mean, it's worth noting, if somebody wants to break Fairchild with Faust, they're going to be spending 5 cards?
Yes, they are. They're probably using a David.
Yeah, they're probably using a David, but yeah, it's awful. We got Next Bronze, which is also pretty good, messing with people's math.
For sure. Next Bronze has always been a favorite piece ice of mine. Funny side note, at Worlds 2013, I made top 16 with an HB deck, and that was the time the Catman decks came to power. I actually piloted one there. So these decks were mainly breaking with Catman. I had 1 Next Bronze in, if you can believe that, because I wanted a piece of ice at 1 strength, to fool with the Otman. So I've been playing this card forever. I always loved it.
Yeah, it's a solid piece of ice, and it can definitely get... What I think is interesting about the next suite is each piece of the suite taxes like a specific type of breaker suite. Right? Like if you're on Yogg, I mean, not that many people are on Yogg as their sole code gatebreaker. But if you're on Yogg, once next bronze gets going, it becomes terrible, right? If you're on like cheating through barrier, if you're hard breaking barriers, you know, next silver's terrible. Like it's just really good. So we've got.
It is, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I faced a Andy Yogg sucker today, and it was a little worrisome at first, but you're right. Once you get to 4 and 5 strength bronzes, and you can wipe viruses, now they're gonna have a hard time.
Yeah. Because HB, I think, besides maybe Polana, yeah, as well as a good contender, like they can create a data sucker lockout pretty easily.
I would agree.
We got Turing. Turing's pretty good too. It's especially good if people are using AI. It just shuts people down.
You're still seeing a lot of AI out of Orange.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just not. It doesn't have bad numbers on it either.
No, on a remote, it's still fantastic.
Yeah. So we've got 2 architects. So good.
Really good. Can't be killed for the influence. You know, I had a few extra influence, and you know, for the sentry options, I wanted something reasonably priced that's painful.
Literally every time I face check against an HB deck, and I think to myself right as I start the run that was probably a bad idea, every single time it's an architect. Every single time. Like, I remember the day. Do you remember when, like, purple was, like, the one faction that you could just, like, face check first click and it was, like, never a problem?
Yes.
Now you can't do that because it's going to be an arc. Like, literally anytime you face check without a sentry breaker against HB, it's always an architect. It's uncanny. Like...
It's true. Even with the MWL hit and people like this list only having 2, you're right. You always feel like that threat is there, just like you always feel like every time you run against CTM, it's a hard-hitting news. They've got it in their hand, whether they do or not. But
I always love like that exhalation when you run against CTM and you have like no money, and then they draw twice trying to find the hard-hitting, but they don't find it. Feels incredible.
It does.
So we've got Ichis. Ichis are really good in this deck, just from my own personal experience, and I want you to speak to it too. Like, if you can get Sandberg online, this thing can become like a monster.
Yeah, it can become really sick. I've had some people voice some concerns with it. Some people have been swapping them out for Cobras. As you noticed, I don't have a next gold. I did pull it out of here, and that's really good with Sandberg too, but it's very expensive. And there was a concern with the trace on this. This is the only trace ice in the deck, so if you're running into a power tap deck and they face plant Ichi, it actually becomes like it becomes pretty nasty for them to make money off of it. So I still think it's the best bang for the buck out of the bioroids.
Yeah, I mean, and they still have to deal with the trashes. So if they just never have programs the whole game, that's probably not going to work out well for them.
You won, right?
Yeah. Like I feel like yeah, but no, I could definitely see that if they're getting into like a strong mid game, it can be problematic. But it's the one ice that you have that has a trace on it. I think you can suffer that.
It's not bad. Or the worst case, if I feel like it's going to be a detriment, I override it or don't res it.
Right. But yeah, I've definitely caught some people unawares with this, where they go in and they're like, all right, I got the data sucker and the mimic, and I'm like, cool, res Sandberg, GG.
Yep.
But yeah.
Slam 'em.
And Mother Goddess, which is really trolly right now.
It is. It's another borderline card in here, but it just synergizes so well with the next and boosting them. And I caught someone today on a first turn siphon, they couldn't get in because of it. So still really solid.
Yeah. I beat a Geist with this by just windmilling agendas behind it and just leaving everything else unresed.
It works.
Yep.
I don't think Geist can deal with it.
Nope. There's a lot of runners right now that basically Orange runs AI, but like not everybody else, most other people don't right now.
Right. I would agree. Even Ottman is falling out of favor.
Yeah, I mean, most of my Shaper decks have one Ottman, specifically so I can set it at 4. But that's me, I'm old school like that. Ottman 4 does a lot of heavy lifting in Netrunner.
Sure does. Not so much against this deck, luckily.
No. So we've got a pretty standard HB suite. We got 3 beta tests. We got a corporate sales team. Pretty par for the course. 2 global foods. And 3 Project Vitruviuses. This is the question I always ask with any HB deck. How often are you going for the Vitruvius counters, or are you really sticking to the never advance and like the FA go as fast as you can?
Yeah, it's very rare to get a Vitruvius counter. Usually only if I feel like I need it in certain matchups, like a DLR or something where it's going to be more useful.
Right.
I hardly ever go for them in this matchup, and I rarely fire beta tests too. Because there's only 16 ice, so it's more like you noted the fast advance, never advance. It's just another 3/2 that scores quickly.
Did you ever see the meme thing that somebody did where they put the accelerated beta test frame around the Shia LaBeouf? Just do it.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
don't let your dreams be dreams. Just fire it. Yeah, that's how I feel, but I feel like I also always get punished, so that's probably not the best. Yeah, but it's an interesting combination of concepts that, again, like some of the pieces of this have been asleep for a while. We've got some new pieces, but it's bringing together like a bunch of things that HB has done well in the past to like create a very interesting deck that's good for the runners that we're seeing right now.
Yes, I would agree. Nothing's new or magical in here outside of friends, right? And it's but I feel like it really facilitates your econ and just creates for an interesting deck. Although, I mean, a lot of people are saying that it's not fun to play against.
It's 1,000% not fun to play against. This is right up my alley, though. It's a fun police deck. I'm having fun.
Yes, and it's to me it's still a fair deck, a quote fair deck, right? It's not an IG prison deck, right? I feel like people still get accesses because I'm usually protecting remotes first, and they have shots to get in.
Yeah. Just for fun today, I had somebody who is an experienced Apocalypse Kate player play Apocalypse Kate against this deck, and it was just as bad as I thought it would be. I didn't get off the ground quite fast enough, and the hard reset was really bad.
Yeah, that's a tough matchup. That's one problem with this deck. If you can't go fast enough, it doesn't have any defensive upgrades in that regard, right? No Chrysium grids or things like that. So you either have to stack hard on the centrals or just move quick and hold back some ice and have friends more ice back, if you get lucky. But
yeah, so it's a really solid deck. I can't wait to get your thought process on how we're going to pilot it. Spags, you want to tell everybody a little bit more about like where people can find information on the player circuit and stuff like that?
Sure. I guess just keep an eye out. The StimHack forums, Facebook. Usually we'll post things. There's an ANRPC Facebook group. We have the website, ANRPlayersCircuit.com. We're pretty dormant right now. Looking towards circuits next year, we actually have a Rocky Mountain circuit looking to form up. I think we have some people in Utah, Idaho, Colorado. They have some good pocketed metas that are trying to form up into a circuit. So looking towards some dead time in 2017 to start running circuits again.
Cool. Thank you very much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime, Dan.
All right, let's take it for a spin and see how we do. And until we see you all again, always be running.